Welcome to the deep dive.
This is where we
Today
take a
we're
whole stack
getting
of
into something
information,
that drives a lot of us
boil
F1
it down
fans
to the really
absolutely
crucial
mad.
bits,
Why
and
Formula
tailor it
One
just for
cars,
you.
these amazing machines, just seem to
Today we're
completely
diving
bog
deep
down
into
when
the,
it really starts
electrifying
raining.
world of
We're
the
talking about
Hungarian
racing,
Grand
or
Prix.
rather not
We're
racing,
using a
in the
pretty
wet.
comprehensive
And
race
yeah,
guide
Spa
and schedule.
recently
Our
really
mission
brought this whole thing
to
back
give
into
you everything
focus,
you
didn't it? Those
need
endless
to really
delays,
get this
laps behind the
iconic
safety car.
Formula
You
One
sit there
event.
thinking,
Because, you know, this
what
isn't
is
just
actually
another
going
race
on?
on the calendar.
So to help us
it's a
kind of
unique
figure this out,
challenge.
we've got some
Really
really
intense.
fantastic
Oh,
insights.
absolutely.
They
The
come
Hungarian
straight
Grand
from an
Prix just
F1
outside
engineer,
Budapest,
shared
right?
originally
It's been a
over on the
cornerstone of the F1
F1
season
blogs
since,
channel.
like, 1986.
Seriously, if you want more deep
And the
technical stuff
fascinating
after
part
this, you
is
should definitely
how
check
the
out the
track
F1
itself,
blogs channel. Lots of
characteristics,
great
they
content
create
there.
this,
Right. And
very
our
distinct
mission
kind of
today
race,
really
one
is
where,
to
you know,
try and
pure
get
speed
past
often
that
plays second
initial
fiddle to precision
frustration.
driving,
You know, when you see a race
really
delayed
clever
or
strategies,
worse, basically
serious
called
tests
off
for
because of
drivers
rain,
and teams.
we want to
Demands a
dig
different
into
kind of
the
Okay,
the complex
let's unpack that then.
engineering
The circuit, the
reasons, the
Hungarian.
safety side, which is
Considered one of
huge,
those
and
demanding.
frankly,
Why
the
is that?
economics
What exactly
behind
makes it so
why
tough
racing
for
these
everyone
modern
involved?
F1 cars in
Well, it gets
proper
that
heavy rain is
reputation
just
because it's just
so
so
incredibly
low.
difficult.
A
It's really not as
constant
simple
string
as
of slow
blaming
and
drivers
medium
for
speed
not being
corners
brave enough,
and
or
very,
race
very
control
few
being
proper
too cautious
straights.
for no
It's a
reason.
compact
There's a
layout.
lot more to it.
That's the thing that
4.381
gets me,
kilometers,
and probably a lot of you
14
listening. You see the old
super
clips, right?
technical
Cars
turns.
splashing
What
through
that means for the
puddles,
drivers is
drivers
like
wrestling the wheel,
surgical
but they're
precision,
racing.
constantly
Then you watch
lifting the
now, and
wheel,
sometimes it feels like a
navigating
bit of
these
drizzle
sequences,
just stops
no
everything.
real rest.
So,
And
okay,
for the
let's
teams,
unpack
it
it.
means
What's
chasing
really
downforce,
changed? Is it the
maximum
cars?
downforce,
It
and
fundamentally
mechanical grip.
is the
Basically
cars.
making the car
And
stick
it's
to the
kind of a
track for those
paradox.
corners,
The
you
very
know.
things that
Sometimes
make
even
these cars
sacrificing
incredibly
straight line
fast
speed
in
to
the
get that
dry
aerodynamic
are
grip.
what make them,
Wow, that really
well,
paints a picture.
almost
Surgical
unmanageable in
precision.
really wet
And
conditions. The main
with a
culprit.
track that twisty
It's
and
the
tight, what's the
extreme
immediate effect on the
aerodynamic
racing
load these
itself?
cars
The
generate.
overtaking must be
Modern F1
tricky.
cars create
Tricky is putting
massive
it mildly.
downforce,
Yeah,
mostly
the
from the
consequence of that
underbody, the
layout is that
floor.
overtakes are
It acts like an
extremely
upside-down
rare.
wing
Few
sucking
long
the
straights
car
to get
down.
around
Right, that's key
someone.
for
Plus, the
cornering
track's
speed.
quite narrow in
Exactly.
places. You often see these
But
DRS trains
when there's
form,
heavy
where
rain,
everyone
that
knows
same
their lane,
underbody
but it
effect
cancels
does
out the
something
advantage.
else. It
Which,
throws
you know,
up an
leads to the big
absolutely
question, if
immense
passing is
amount
that
of
hard,
spray.
how do you actually win
And
that? What
crucially, it's
defines
not just
success?
tire spray we're
That's the
talking
key
about.
question,
It's
isn't it?
spray
You
being
can't just
pulled up from the
blast
ground
past
from
people.
under the car
How does the
itself
race
at really
unfold?
high speed.
It
Okay.
must
Now, this isn't just
completely
bad
change
for
the dynamic.
visibility, though it is
absolutely
terrible
does.
for that.
Because overtaking
This
is so
spray, this
difficult,
turbulent
strategy
water
and
under the car is
crucially
apparently so
qualifying
significant
position
it can
become
actually start
incredibly
to lift the
decisive,
car.
massively
Not like it's
important.
floating, obviously,
Often the race
but
is
it reduces
practically
the
decided
effective
on
load on the
Saturday when
tires.
qualifying,
So the
or,
car,
by some
designed to
really
be glued
smart pit
down,
stop calls
suddenly
on
feels
Sunday.
lighter,
And the
less
drivers.
connected.
They
Wow,
have
okay,
to
that
manage
sounds
their tires
unpredictable.
incredibly
Hugely
carefully.
unpredictable, even on a
All those
straight.
slow corners
Then
mean
you add in
constant
just the
acceleration
size of these
braking,
things.
sure, but also huge
Modern
lateral
F1
load.
cars are,
That
well, they're
built-in
big,
heat
much bigger
causes
than they used to be.
significant wear,
And the
especially with
tires are
Budapest usually
incredibly
being
wide.
hot in
So bigger
August.
car, wider
So,
tires,
tire strategy decided
they
when
just
to pit,
shift
what compound
colossal
to
amount
use.
of water.
Pushing
More
hard
water
or
moved
conserving
means
it
more
becomes a
spray.
high-stakes
Which leads
gamble.
straight back to
One wrong
visibility.
move can cost you
Exactly.
everything.
And this
It
is
really
where
does
things
sound
have
like chess on
fundamentally
wheels,
changed from,
not just a
say,
flat-out
20 years
race.
ago.
So
You
from your
mentioned those
perspective,
old clips,
what's
maybe
the sort of
Montoya
hidden
in
factor at the
2004,
Hungaroring? Is
where
it all that
visibility
pull,
was
or is there
clearly
more to it?
awful.
Well,
But
pole
back then,
position's
maybe the
huge,
tolerance
no
was
doubt.
different.
Running
Now,
from
the
P1
safety
is very
standards are
common there.
rightly
But I think
incredibly
the
high.
unsung hero
Any
maybe is
significant
just
lack of visibility is
relentless
just considered
consistency.
unacceptable. Period.
Discipline.
If
Even
a
a
driver
tiny
can't see a
mistake or
car stopped
lockup,
on track,
running a bit
or even
wide
one
costs
going
you tenths of
slowly, just a
seconds.
short distance
And on this
ahead,
track, you just
well, that's how
can't get that
catastrophic
time back
accidents happen.
easily
And the
through an
sport
overtake. It
absolutely
pushes
cannot
drivers
risk that.
mentally, you
Okay,
know,
that makes sense.
rewarding
Safety has to come
precision just
first.
as much as
Absolutely.
aggression. It
And then
really
there's
shows how
aquaplaning. This
crucial
isn't
the
just
mental
sliding on a wet
gymnastics
track.
are.
Aquaplaning
Right,
is,
that
it's
mental fortitude.
totally random.
Okay, we've
The
covered the race
tire
mechanics. Let's
completely
broaden that a bit
loses
to the whole
contact with the
weekend
asphalt.
experience.
It's
F1
literally riding on
is the
water.
main show,
It can happen
obviously, but
suddenly,
the
even
place
on a
is
straight,
buzzing
without
with other
warning.
action too, right?
The
What
driver
other
has
series
zero
share the
control.
track?
Oh yeah,
Zero.
it's a packed
Our
weekend.
engineer
You've got the
source
main
called it a
sports
lottery.
series,
And
Formula
you just
2,
can't have a
F2,
lottery at
Formula 3,
200 miles an
F3,
hour. It's a
plus the
massive
Porsche
safety
Super
red
Cup,
flag.
which is great
So
for the
putting it all
fans because you
together,
get to
what
see
you're
the,
saying is,
the potential
it's
future
not that that today's drivers are less skilled or brave than drivers from, say, the 80s or 90s. That's a common thing you hear, isn't it? It's actually about the cars themselves. Their fundamental design for dry speed, coupled with today's non-negotiable safety standards, creates this incompatibility with heavy rain.
Precisely. It's a trade-off baked into the current formula. The quest for ultimate dry performance has made them incredibly vulnerable in the wet.
And yes, Spa. That 2021 race is probably the poster child for this whole issue.
Yeah.
And we saw similar issues again more recently, just hours of waiting, a couple of laps trundling behind the safety car. Huge frustration all around. Why is Spa specifically such a nightmare when it rains?
Spa. It really dials all these problems up to 11. Firstly, it's a long track, over 7 kilometers. and it's seriously fast, high average speeds. What that means is the amount of spray generated is just way higher than somewhere slower, like Monaco. The closing speeds between cars are higher too. It inherently ups the danger level.
Okay, longer track, more speed, more spray. Makes sense.
Then Spa is famous for its microclimates. You can have one part of the track, maybe the start-finish straight or the bus stop, that's sort of damp, maybe runnable. But then you go through Eau Rouge, up the Kemmel Straight, and it's like a monsoon. Standing water, zero visibility, and this can change really fast, even within one lap. Drivers just don't know what they're heading into.
Right, you hear them on the radio saying one corner is fine, the next is flooded.
Exactly, and just to top it off, statistically, Spa just gets a lot of rain. It's one of the wettest circuits they visit, so these problems are bound to crop up there more often. And think about the poor race director in all this. They're under immense pressure. Broadcasters want to show, fans want to race, promoters need laps run, but their absolute #1 priority has to be safety. Driver safety, marshal safety. They're looking at the data, hearing the drivers yelling about visibility, and they have to make that call. The engineer we mentioned put it starkly. Temperatures can easily hit 35 degrees Celsius, maybe even a bit more. And someone gets seriously hurt, #1 priority. Then what? Or worse, right? F1 is a massive business. Avoiding catastrophic accidents is priority #1, always. The damage, human and reputational, would be unthinkable. Way worse than an annoying delay.
Yeah, you can see the dilemma. Still, it's frustrating as a fan, especially when you look back at Spa 2021. That was 4 years ago now, and it feels like we're in exactly the same place. It seems like nothing's really changed, no real progress has been made on this specific issue, which leads to the next obvious question. If these are the problems, surely these brilliant F1 engineers are thinking about solutions. What can they actually do, technically, to make these cars better, or at least safer in the rain?
Oh, absolutely, they're thinking about it. And there are theoretical technical fixes. Some have even been sort of trialed here and there. One idea that comes up a lot is adjustable ride heights. Could cars be forced to run much higher off the ground in wet conditions? Getting that full or further away might reduce some of that underside spray.
Lift the car up, basically.
Yeah, lift it up within regulations for the wet. Another idea is a completely dedicated aero package just for rain. You know, like IndyCar has specific kits for ovals versus road courses. Could F1 design a wet spec car? Different wings, maybe different floor edges.
And what about those fender things we sometimes see tested?
The mud guards.
Gardabaros, yeah. They've tried various designs to try and catch the tire spray, but honestly, none of the attempts so far have really hit the mark, apparently. It's really difficult. You try to block the spray, but you might mess up the cooling, or add too much weight, or just create other aero problems. It's a tricky balance. But, and this is the really big but, even if you could design perfect solutions, why aren't they being used? The simple, blunt answer: cost.
Of course, money.
Always. Think about it. Preparing two completely different car specifications, a dry setup and a full wet setup for every single race weekend, that's potentially double the work. We're talking R&D, manufacturing all these extra parts, testing them, transporting them, having spares. The operational cost would be, well, the engineer called it potentially infinite in practical terms. Teams would basically be prepping for two different types of races each time.
And we're in the budget cap era now. Exactly. Teams are already squeezed trying to develop their main car under the cost cap. Finding the resources, the money, the personnel to develop and run a completely separate wet weather package is just not feasible under the current financial rules. The money simply isn't there within the cap constraints. It would take resources away from making the car faster in the dry, which is still where 97-98% of the racing happens. And let's be brutally honest about the economics from the sports perspective. Based on the engineer's stats, really badly rain-affected races, the ones causing delays or cancellations, they're pretty rare, maybe 1 to 3% of races overall. So statistically speaking, it's actually cheaper for F1 as a business to occasionally deal with the fallout from a controversial event like Spa 2021, the fan anger, the bad press, than it is to invest potentially billions across the teams for a bulletproof rain solution that's rarely needed.
That's not just power, calculation.
It's the economic reality of it. And even looking ahead to the 2026 rules, yeah, the cars might be a bit smaller, a bit less reliant on ground effect, but the improvement for wet weather running expected to be minimal. Maybe 5 or 10% better. It's not going to solve the fundamental problem.
It's interesting, isn't it? Aerodynamics are key to F1 speed, but in many ways, aero is the enemy of close racing, especially when conditions aren't perfect. You see it less in series like Formula E or touring cars where the aero isn't so dominant.
Okay, so the cost is the massive roadblock. But what if? What if the FIA created a kind of exception, like a dedicated budget allowance just just for wet weather parts, outside the main cab. Could that work? That's an interesting thought. A specific carve-out, it would definitely signal intent, wouldn't it? And teams are geniuses at finding performance within any set of rules, so maybe it could spark some innovation. But even then, even if you had the budget for special fenders or a high downforce rain wing, you still eventually hit a fundamental physical limit. You can improve things, maybe make racing possible in lighter rain more often, but you can't engineer away a torrential downpour and the physics of water on track.
Right. So that brings us to maybe the ultimate question here. Is there just a hard limit, a point where no amount of engineering can make an F1 car safe to race in the wet? Or can we always find a way?
I think based on what the engineer explained and just basic physics, yes, there is an inherent limit, a hard limit. Think about driving your own road car. If it's raining, absolutely cats and dogs, visibility drops to near zero. You feel the car starting to aquaplane. What do? You have to slow down, maybe even stop. Doesn't matter if you're in a basic hatchback or a high-performance sports car. There's a point where it's just not safe.
Yeah, everyone's experienced that feeling.
Well, F1 cars, because of their design, the speed, the way they use the air, the tires, they just hit that limit much sooner and much more dramatically than a road car. And the absolute key, the thing that overrides everything else, is visibility. If the drivers literally cannot see the car in front of them, or debris, or a marshal, it stops being a race. It's just pure chance. Driver skill goes out the window.
It becomes a lottery, like you said before.
Exactly. Compared to something like rally cars don't generate this insane aerospray, and they run minutes apart on a stage, not packed together. That's why they can race in terrible conditions. Visibility and proximity aren't the same critical factors.
Tricky is putting it mildly.
So really, you have to think of heavy rain
like overtakes are extremely rare.
Nighttime,
few long straights to get a run on someone. Plus, they don't have headlights. They're not designed to race in the dark without massive temporary.
Everyone can open their wing, but it
cancels out.
Heavy rain is a similar
leads
environmental
to the big
condition.
If passing
the
is that
fundamental
hard, how do you
design
actually
of these
win there?
open-wheel, high-aero cars just isn't compatible with beyond a certain threshold. Now, could they have maybe pushed it a bit more at spot, started a bit earlier behind the safety car, done fewer laps just to satisfy the rules? Maybe. Perhaps it was overly cautious on that specific day. The underlying problem is the extreme spray, the total lack of visibility, the risk of aquaplaning in really heavy rain that remains a fundamental
really smart
you can't just ignore for the sake of putting on a show.
And the drivers.
Okay, this has been really illuminating. We've sort of peeled back the layers here.
Yeah.
The engineering that makes them fast but vulnerable, the absolute necessity of safety, and those stark economic truths that limit the potential solutions. It's complicated.
It really is.
So for you listening, where does this leave us? As fans, do we just have to accept that sometimes, maybe rarely, a race will be heavily affected or even canceled by rain? Is that the price we pay for the incredible speed and safety we see most weekends? Or should we be demanding more? Should the sport find a way, find the money to develop cars that can race properly in the wet, even if it doesn't make perfect economic sense according to the statistics? It's a tough one.
It is. There are no easy answers here, just those difficult trade-offs we've been talking about. A lot of nuance.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into F1's wet weather woes. And remember, for more fantastic F1 insights, technical breakdowns, and discussions, make sure you head over and check out the F1 Blogs channel. Definitely give it a subscribe. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.